Welcome to Cerner's live experience at HIMSS 2019 in Orlando, Florida. We are streaming live from the Cerner recording studio on the HIMSS exhibit floor, where we're sharing unique and insightful perspectives from some of the brightest minds in healthcare. At Cerner, we are intent on becoming the partner of choice for innovation in healthcare. But innovation only happens through collaboration. We are at a place of immense opportunity and possibility in this industry, but our next chapter can only be as powerful as the collaborative relationships that we cultivate. Today, we're discussing nationwide interoperability and how the CommonWell Carequality connection is improving patient care. We're joined in the studio by Dr. David McCallie, Senior Vice President, Medical Informatics at Cerner, and our guests, Jitin Asnaani, Executive Director of CommonWell Health Alliance, and Dave Cassel, Executive Director of Carequality. Dr. McCallie, Jitin, and Dave, thank you for joining us today.
Hello, Dave and Jitin. Thanks for joining us today to talk about CommonWell and Carequality. With the CommonWell Carequality connection going live, participating providers will have more than double the number of provider sites with whom they could share patient data nationwide. How do you think this new connectivity will fill in some of the gaps that have been in place beforehand?
Well, simplistically, obviously, as you double the number of provider sites, you're automatically going to fill in some gaps. You know, there are certainly areas where Carequality had a certain amount of coverage, but there were also organizations that were part of CommonWell, and I'm sure the same is true vice versa as well. But now with the two coming together, you have the two communities and the superset of those organizations. You're certainly going to cover more areas geographically.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. I mean, that's exactly correct. I mean, really, in some ways, it comes down to simple math. The reality is, if you look at sort of communities across the U.S., some had, high concentration of Carequality implementers already, and for them, they'll see a little bit of value, but they have already capturing a lot of the local value. Similar with CommonWells, we had our locations around the U.S. where there's high density of CommonWell deployed members. And of course, you get the value of being able to get the data for the patient from across the nation, but you get a lot of it from that local value as well. But there are lots of communities where there was specifically, a little bit of that and a little bit of this. And the reality is now that they can get CommonWell and Carequality in those communities, it suddenly makes sense for them to engage in the process of learning how to interoperate, which is, both a technical constraint, which both organizations through their work have dramatically reduced the work that goes into it, but it's also a process from a clinical, from the perspective of providing clinical care and being able to leverage data to take good care of your patients. So it suddenly becomes much more interesting to go down that path in those geographies.
Yeah, it really adds that critical mass kind of element to the calculations that provider organizations would go through as to whether or not to participate. Now, if you have the shared weight of the original Carequality community, now the Carequality community with CommonWell as a Carequality implementer, it does make a difference. It adds more potential, more sites that are going to be engaged, and that just makes you all the more likely to connect. So it becomes a virtuous cycle where the more sites are connecting, the more value they then add for others in turn.
Yeah, and one other thing, this is great because it also reminds me that and of course the same could be said for CommonWell, right? For us, there were big gaps and that got filled in by the rest of the Carequality community, and so now this being part of that full community is extremely valuable. But there's also a snowball effect because with the two organizations bringing so much mass in terms of EHRs who serve 90% of the acute care sites out there, who serve 60% of the ambulatory sites out there. It just means that for other EHRs and HIT systems and others who are in the industry and in the community but are not part of these two organizations, they really have to kind of take a hard look and figure out why they're not there. They need to be a part of this because suddenly it's more of a no-brainer to be part of it.
Yeah, I agree. That's an important follow-on effect. I mentioned specifically the provider organizations seeing the critical mass. The same goes for other players, whether those are EHR vendors, health information exchanges, other services that are out there. They see the combined weight, and it's something that they want to be a part of as well.
So a little bit more of a technical question. Can you contrast the way connectivity occurs through CommonWell and Carequality versus sort of the old point-to-point interface negotiations? Does that make sense as a question? You understand the contrast? Because I think that's really an underappreciated difference.
Well, as you think about what goes into any individual interface connection, if you will, first of all, you have to sit down and think about what the rules of the road are for that connection. How can you get the health information management folks bought in? How can you get patient consent taken care of? How do you generally satisfy the legal folks? Then you've got to get the technical folks in a room, and they need to decide what standards are we going to use, what nuances exist to those standards. All of that needs to be done before you even get to things like testing and working out the gaps from a communication standpoint. So when you take all of that and you instead have one implementation where you're connecting to CommonWell or Carequality or both, you still have to go through some of those steps, although we've standardized a number of those processes, but now you just have to do that once, and that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I think I'll piggyback on that. Having worked previously at an EHR vendor, the legal process of coming up with a sharing agreement with a single trading partner as part of a point-to-point connectivity process can be exceedingly daunting. And it's also incredibly uneven and asymmetric. If you're a small provider organization wanting to connect to a hospital, you're really in a position where you have to it's give it or take it, give it or leave it types of terms, right? Sorry, take it or leave it types of terms. Potentially, you certainly are not in a position of power there, nor do you know if you're getting a sort of fair agreement. And then you have to. That's before you even get the lawyers involved in actually, breaking it down and understanding the compliance and security and all of that jazz. On top of that, there's the technical issue itself around building individual point-to-points, which if we had to do that nationwide across all the sort of the settings of care that exist out there, it would literally require an amount of money way beyond our entire GDP. So the approach that CommonWell and Carequality afford in this one unit, one connection that allows you to get that broad scope of exchange, both from a legal perspective and a technical perspective, is incredibly valuable. In CommonWell, our particular approach, of course, is since we are a network participating in Carequality's communities of networks, a community of networks. As a network, we can provide that literally a single connection that gets you all of CommonWell as well as connects you to all of Carequality. So from a technical perspective, it's even simpler for a member of our network. But that's probably true for other networks in the Carequality community as well.
So what would you say to providers who are on the fence about implementing CommonWell or Carequality? What would you say that would push them over and get them to do it, or ask their organizations to do it?
There are a couple of things you can point to. More and more, just organically from a business perspective, the need for interoperability is apparent. As we continue this journey towards dramatically changing payment in the U.S. from in terms of value-based care and the various iterations it's gone through, including ACOs and the like, interoperability is just table stakes. As we get more involved in managing the care of patients, as whether as populations or if you're looking at just your more high-risk patients, or whether you're trying to keep people healthy, for that matter. You have to know more about them. You have to know where they are. You need to be able to actually perform the appropriate set of interventions and guidance and so on to keep them on the path that you need in order to bend the cost curve. In all of those cases, the big business value just far exceeds the friction that's created by trying to interoperate. And now that the friction itself is dramatically reduced by the work that CommonWell and Carequality have done, again, it becomes much more of a no-brainer. And that's completely ignoring the big elephant in the room that got dropped earlier this week in terms of regulations, where the information blocking rules, I'll admit I have not read the 1,000 pages in the detail that it deserves. But if you look at information blocking and where that's going, it is becoming it is probably going to be a legal requirement to be able to connect and exchange data in that fashion, and the fashion that CommonWell and Carequality enable relatively painlessly. There's again I think that's another aspect which should compel providers to jump in sooner rather than later, and actually take advantage of the opportunity this creates, rather than look at it as kind of being dragged kicking and screaming into the 21st century.
Shame on you, Jitin, for not finishing all of your reading yet. There's another. I agree completely, by the way, with all of that. But I think there's another element of maybe just weary skepticism that I think is out there for some folks, that they've heard about interoperability, that for whatever reason they've had challenges in their specific community or their particular situation. But for those folks, I think it's worth saying that it really is taking off. It really is working. What you've been promised, well, I guess it depends on what you've been promised, but to a large degree, some of the promise of interoperability is now being realized. And so it is a good time, if you're still on the fence, to get off.
Great. Can each of you say a little bit about future advancements that you think might be down the road with your various respective services?
Sure, I can take a stab. Actually, it turns out some of those advancements are pretty complementary, and it's not by accident. I don't know how many of the kind of listeners know of the history of CommonWell and Carequality, but I hope all of you learned today that we spend a lot of time attached to the hip. I don't know how many times Dave and I have now sat down together publicly or privately working out on stuff which we just know that is important for interoperability nationwide. We're both kind of focused on this with the two very complementary missions to make this happen. So a couple of things that strike me, Dave, and of course please add on and other specific things that Carequality is working on. First of all, obviously continuing to broaden the collective reach. We want more providers to be turned on live. We want more participants to participate and to utilize the network for treatment and beyond. Secondly, we are, in CommonWell today, we're demonstrating in the HIMSS Interoperability Showcase notifications. So going beyond pulling of data, the query and retrieve of data, and now actually providing proactive event notifications to providers in the care of the patients for whom they're, particularly want to keep their eye on or be able to help participate and improve their care. And so that's coming to the network this year in production. There is a fair bit of work on content, and that is a lot of it is completely joint effort with Carequality and now with HL7 and ONC and others around improving the content of the documents that get shared today, the CCDA documents that get shared today, as well as kind of keeping our eye towards discrete data and the work that's going to come in through coming through kind of the Argonaut project and the FHIR APIs and the FHIR data requirements and so on that HL7, ONC, CMS, and others are rightfully helping the industry to push towards.
Dave, what about Carequality? Are there specific things that Jitin didn't cover?
Well, there are a lot of things that Jitin did cover that we're certainly working on as well. And I think when it comes to our direct collaboration, I think that content project really speaks well. We put a lot of work jointly into content recommendations and are going to be continuing to advance that work. It's interesting that Jitin mentioned the notifications being done through the CommonWell service. That's, from the Carequality standpoint, is sort of step zero, if you will. For Carequality's model, once there are services like that out there, networks that are providing notification services, then Carequality has a governance use case, if you will, to provide our model of connectivity between those different services. So to the extent that notifications need to flow within the CommonWell community or within Acme Healthcare Network, that's wonderful. But to the extent that there are patients who are moving between and among subscribers to various services, we think that there is a lot of room for value from Carequality standpoint in that notifications realm as well. And similar in FHIR-based exchange, Jitin mentioned, certainly everyone in healthcare is working on FHIR, and it's sort of fascinating. There's this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. The standard that becomes the one that we use is the one that we decide is the one that we want to use. Once you decide that FHIR is the way to go, it takes on a life of its own. And in some ways, any standard would do if we all just agreed on it. But we've agreed on FHIR, and I think that's a good thing. That has a lot of good attributes, and Carequality is looking, as those implementations mature, to apply our governance approach to FHIR-based exchange as well.
Great. So here's a little bit of a hard question, curveball. To the degree that you feel comfortable with your crystal ball, what effect do you think TEFCA, the Trusted Exchange proposal from ONC and CMS, will have on CommonWell and Carequality?
Well, I for one don't think that it will do much to influence our direct collaboration. I think that we'll continue to do that. There is an element to the Trusted Exchange framework that is similar to the mission of Carequality, and so we'll see how that plays out in terms of the whether there is ultimately some other organization that fills a role, or if Carequality ends up filling the recognized coordinating entity or RCE role. So it's certainly something that I'm personally watching closely. We'll see how that turns out, but there as Jitin indicated, I will admit I have not done all of my reading either, but there certainly is a lot to wade through from the rules that were just recently dropped, proposed rules, and then we'll learn more, obviously, as we get to the real full picture of the proposed ecosystem once the next draft of the TEF comes out as well.
And this is Jitin. I'd agree with those comments. Now, in TEFCA, to just remind everybody, there was the notion of QHINs, Qualified Health Information Networks, who would provide a set of services that would enable data exchange that is person-centered, very akin to what CommonWell does today, a patient index or RLS, and what I think in TEFCA is called the connectivity broker. That enables you to find a patient's data and retrieve it, and would be required to federate in some form of capacity, TBD, with others who provide such services. And so this sort of interconnected set of QHINs forms sort of the backbone, the way ISPs form the backbone of the internet, and is governed by and takes direction from the RCE, which is what Dave discussed, the recognized coordinating entity. And what CommonWell has said, and will continue to say, is that we intend to be a QHIN. We have created a trust framework that works well within CommonWell, and now we've worked through our partnership with Carequality to enable the exchange to flow between us and other networks in the Carequality community. As TEFCA comes along in the sort of the next iteration, and hopefully at some point in time a final rule, we'll work with the recognized coordinating entity to ensure that we can make TEFCA successful. And I imagine that our collaboration with Carequality will only grow, and if it needs to, based on the TEF, have to evolve, but then we'll work to involve it in the right direction so that everybody kind of succeeds. Because that notion of how of an interconnected health system that really achieves that kind of vision, that actually does look pretty much very alike to what Carequality itself kind of envisioned. We believe in it, and that's why we're a part of Carequality, and that's why we'll support what comes next.
Great. Any final thoughts before we wind up?
I'd say there's so much TBD in terms of regulations, and even the regulations which just dropped right now were very focused on actually other aspects of interoperability that CommonWell and Carequality have some role to play in, but not necessarily the biggest role. Some of it is very patient and EHR centered, and there's just and kind of my perspective on this, and I'd love to hear Dave's thought on this as well, is the best you can do is do what you can with the information you have right now. We know we're pushing the ball in terms of query retrieve, in terms of notifications, in terms of these other things which are obviously good for the provision of care and for individuals across the U.S. And we're going to keep doing that, and we'll have to just evolve with the regulations, adapt to them, hopefully actually fulfill some of them on behalf of our members and their customers. But in the meantime, it's we're really not going to freeze. We're going to keep working. We're going to continue deploying more on Carequality, more on CommonWell, and helping us to achieve that interconnected health system, kind of no matter what comes up at us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right, and in particular, the very last point there, Jitin, about not freezing. These are. First of all, a lot of things to react to. There's a comment period. I think as we delve into the details, we're going to find little bits and pieces throughout that end up having an impact on what we do. But that said, there's a period of time here where there's before we ultimately get to a final rule, and before ultimately that final rule gets into effect. I certainly don't intend to wait, and I know that Jitin doesn't either. We're going to continue to advance the ball as well as we can, and I don't think we can do anything else, especially as there are so many moving parts coming out of the 21st century cures and like the TEFCA that we just spoke of, information blocking that came out. All of that is going to work together, and exactly what it means we don't know, but we're going to keep working, and exactly as Jitin said, as we need to evolve, we'll evolve.
Excellent. Thank you both, Jitin and Dave. I hope the audience has appreciated your insights. There's a lot of content there.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.